Standing waist deep in the ocean, the researcher reached out her hand, holding a coconut. A man from an Andamanese tribe took the coconut. This moment was the first time outsiders had made friendly contact with these people. You're probably wondering, who are the Andamanese people? They are the indigenous peoples of the Andaman Islands, islands located off the coast of India. They have survived and thrived in this part of the world for thousands of years. For most of their long history, the Andamanese people kept to themselves. They had no interest in meeting outsiders. When outsiders tried to make contact, they were often met with arrows. This is understandable. In the past, strangers brought danger and disease to their people. One brave researcher was about to change this. Who was this researcher, and why was she able to do what others had failed to do before? This is the incredible story of Dr. Madhumala Chattopadhyay, the Indian anthropologist who made history.
Hi, young historians. Welcome to another episode of Anytime Now. I'm Brooke, co-founder of Honest History. We're so excited for this episode as we learn more about the indigenous people of the Andaman Islands, a place that very, very few outsiders have ever seen. To this day, visitation to many of these islands is strictly prohibited so that the native people can live in peace without outside influence. However, in 1991, one Indian woman made friendly contact with the Sentinelese. This is the story of her life and the lessons she learned from her experience. It's time to head to a small chain of islands off the coast of India. Let's go!
Our story begins around 1973. Madhumala Chattopadhyay was 12 years old. She lived in Shibpur, a suburb of Kolkata, India. That particular day, she was reading the newspaper. As she scanned the pages, something caught her eye. It was a small news report about the almost extinct Anji people of the Andamans. The newspaper announced that an Anji baby had been born. It was the cause of much celebration. Chattopadhyay was curious. Who are the Anjis and what are the Andamans? The Andamans are islands located over 700 miles from mainland India. Poking out of turquoise blue waters, these islands are the home of several indigenous peoples. The Anjis are one group of people from this part of the world. Other indigenous groups include the Jarawas and the Sentinelese. You'll learn a bit more about them later. The Anjis are an ancient people. Scholars believe they have existed for 30,000 to 50,000 years. Historically, the Anjis lived on several of the Andaman Islands. For thousands of years, their daily life revolved around the sea and the forest. They ate fish, sea turtles, lobsters, and crabs. In the lush, damp forests, the Anjis gathered wild fruits, vegetables, honey, and insects, and hunted for wild pigs. Today, the Anjis live in small villages on one of the Andaman Islands, called Little Andaman. The Anjis suffered greatly when outsiders and colonizers arrived on the islands. These outsiders brought disease, which sadly killed many people. Battles and the changing environment also hurt the Anjis. In 1901, there were about 672 Anjis living on the islands. But in 1971, when Chattopadhyay was a young girl, there were only about 112 Anjis. Chattopadhyay finished reading the newspaper article and ran over to her father. She excitedly asked if they could visit the Anjis on their next vacation. Her father shook his head. He told her that was impossible. Only researchers and journalists were allowed to visit the indigenous people of the Andaman Islands. That day, at 12 years old, an idea was born. Chattopadhyay decided that she would become a researcher. One day, she hoped, she would be able to meet these people and learn more about their lives on the islands. For the next few years, Chattopadhyay worked hard in school. She even finished at the top of her class. When she went to college, she decided to study anthropology. Chattopadhyay's parents were a bit confused by her choice. What on earth is anthropology? They asked her. Chattopadhyay explained that she needed to study anthropology if she wanted to meet the Angis. Anthropology is the study of people and cultures in the past and today. There are anthropologists who study languages and anthropologists who study how our bodies have changed over time. There are also anthropologists who study different peoples living today. This was the type of anthropologist Chattopadhyay wanted to be. After Chattopadhyay finished university, she decided to go one step further. She applied for a PhD. Depending on what a person studies, a PhD can be the highest degree they get. You can get PhDs in subjects like science, math, history, and, well, of course, anthropology. Chattopadhyay applied for a PhD fellowship with the Anthropological Survey of India. If she got it, she would be able to travel to the islands and research the indigenous people of the Andaman Islands. She would finally be a researcher. The committee that reviewed the PhD applications was not quite sure what to do. Chattopadhyay was an exceptional student, but she was a woman. At that time, people thought it was not safe for a woman to work with these tribes. In the past, the Andamanese peoples had been unwelcoming to outsiders. On earlier occasions, women members of visiting teams had been attacked, Chattopadhyay explained. The committee finally agreed to give her the fellowship on one condition. Her parents had to agree that if anything happened to Chattopadhyay, the Anthropological Survey of India would not be held responsible. Chattopadhyay understood that her research might be dangerous, but she was determined. Her mother signed the form to let her daughter go. Over the following years, Chattopadhyay would research different groups of indigenous peoples who lived on the Andaman Islands. But her most famous work would happen in 1991 when she was 29 years old. That year, Chattopadhyay had been picked to join a team to make contact with the Sentinelese people of the Andaman Islands. In the past, the contact teams had been made up of only men. Chattopadhyay would be the first woman to try to contact the Sentinelese.
Hi, young historians! Time for a quick break from this amazing story to tell you a bit more about honest history. If you're enjoying this episode, then you'll love Honest History's magazines and books. Each one is filled with important adventures through the past, like the story of Cheng Yi Sao, a Chinese woman who commanded one of the largest pirate fleets in history, to Mansa Musa from Africa, one of the wealthiest people to ever live. You can pick up a copy or subscribe and receive 3 issues delivered straight to your doorstep every 3 months. Just go to honesthistory.co and use code ANYTIMENOW for a 10% discount. That's honesthistory.co and special promo code ANYTIMENOW. Okay, let's get back to the story.
That year, Chattopadhyay had been picked to join a team to make contact with the Sentinelese people of the Andaman Islands. In the past, the contact teams had been made up of only men. Chattopadhyay would be the first woman to try to contact the Sentinelese. The Sentinelese were unwelcoming to outsiders. In fact, 17 years ago, filmmakers had traveled to the island to make a documentary film about the people. The film crew had been met with a shower of arrows. One of the arrows had hit the film's director right in the leg. Since then, outsiders had been careful to stay away. Chattopadhyay and the rest of the team were not sure what would happen during this trip, but they had a plan. On January 4th at 8 o'clock in the morning, Chattopadhyay and 12 men boarded a small boat. They were miles away from the mainland of India. Rowing through the turquoise waters, Chattopadhyay could see the white sandy beach ahead. And just behind the sand, she spied the dense green jungle. This was the North Sentinel Island, one of the Andaman Islands. As they got closer, the contact team saw 3 huts on the island, but there were no people. Maybe they needed to try a different part of the island. As they scanned the beach in front of them, they spied a thin line of gray smoke in the distance. The smoke was the sign they needed. It was the sign of human life. They steered the boat in the direction of the smoke. Then, there in the distance, Chattopadhyay saw people. They were hiding behind the trees, and many were carrying bows and arrows. The contact team needed to be careful. How could they show the people that they meant no harm? What sign could they give them? The team had brought coconuts with them on the boat. Slowly they began dropping the coconuts into the water, letting the fruit float toward the beach. They waited. A few of the Sentinelese men ran into the water and began collecting the coconuts. This was a good sign. The men were accepting the contact team's gifts. Chattopadhyay and the team began dropping more coconuts into the ocean, and the men collected them. This continued for 4 more hours. Finally, the team ran out of coconuts. They decided to turn back and sail to a larger ship that was anchored close by. They could gather more coconuts from the ship and return. It was late afternoon. Chattopadhyay and the team were back with more coconuts. As they began to drop the fruit into the water, they noticed the Sentinelese people were less afraid. The people began shouting in excitement. A young man even got close enough to the contact team that he touched their boat. Things were going well, but Chattopadhyay knew that it could change at any moment. She saw a young boy sitting on the shore. He stood up and raised his bow, armed with an arrow. Chattopadhyay's heart beat quickly in her chest. She tried not to show her fear. Instead, she motioned to the boy, trying to tell him to come collect coconuts in the water. The two stared at each other. The boy began to release the arrow, aiming straight at the team. Thankfully, a woman nearby pushed the boy slightly. He lost his footing, and he missed his target. To Chattopadhyay's relief, the arrow fell into the water. No one was hurt. The contact team decided to keep going. Chattopadhyay leapt out of the boat and into the ocean. She was nearly waist deep in the salty water. She took a coconut in her hand and held it out in front of her. A Sentinelese man stretched out his arm and took the coconut from her hand. He accepted her gift. It was a gesture of trust. That day, for the first time in history, no one was attacked or injured. The Sentinelese people and the contact team met each other as equals. This was not the end of Chattopadhyay's adventures. That same year, she also became the first woman to make friendly contact with another tribe on the islands, the Jarawas. Outsiders had made contact with the Jarawas before, but it had not always been peaceful. Outsiders had made contact with the Jarawas before, but it had not always been peaceful. When she traveled to meet the Jarawas, she stayed behind in a boat while the rest of the team headed to the beach. The contact team was unsure how the Jarawas would react to a female outsider. But soon, the Jarawa women began calling out to Chattopadhyay. They asked her to come closer. Chattopadhyay sat in a small boat as she floated towards the beach to greet the people. When she got to the island, 5 Jarawa men climbed onto the boat. They sat across from her, looking at Chattopadhyay in curiosity. Then, a woman climbed into the boat next to Chattopadhyay. Chattopadhyay was not sure what to do. Using her instincts, Chattopadhyay reached out toward the woman and hugged her. The woman was happy to receive Chattopadhyay's embrace. Across both cultures, this was a gesture of friendship. You feel that you are there to study, but actually, they are the ones who study you. You are foreign in their lands, Chattopadhyay said years later. Chattopadhyay became a regular visitor to the Jarawas' land. She believed being a woman helped her during her research. It could well be that these native people believed a woman among the visitors meant that the latter posed no threat to their security, she said. The women invited her to play with their children and shared food with her. The people also began to trust Chattopadhyay as a healer. With time, they began to show me their injuries. The men and women kept calm while I applied medicines and ointments on them. Over the next few years, Chattopadhyay had a chance to work with the people who inspired her years ago. The people she learned about when she was 12 years old. The Angis. These days, Madhumala Chattopadhyay lives a much quieter life, working for the government in India. Though her name is not well known around the world, her research has made an impact. Today, there are only about 400 to 450 Andamanese people. The Angis, Jarawas, and Sentinelese continue to fight to keep their culture alive. In fact, the Sentinelese want to remain independent and do not welcome outsiders to their land. It is important to respect their wishes. These ancient communities hold a rich history that spans thousands of years. For a brief moment in time, Chattopadhyay had been welcomed into their world, and that is an incredible gift that she will not forget.
Welcome back. What did you learn from this episode? I highly encourage you to watch some of the great educational videos online about the story and to see for yourself what the Andaman Islands look like. It's fascinating to think about people today who live without influence from the Western world. Try to imagine yourself living with your friends and family on an island. Would you want outsiders contacting you? What would you enjoy about a lifestyle like the Sentinelese have? That's all for now, but if you want to learn more about India, check out issue 10 of Honest History magazine and learn all about Nur Jahan and so many more incredible stories from this amazing country. See you all next time. This episode was hosted by Sandeep Parikh and written by Heidi Coburn. Production was led by Randall Lawrence. To learn more about this episode, including more about the host, visit us at honesthistory.co and follow along for updates on social media at Honest History.